Test 1, 2.
Good evening. Could I just test that you can hear us?
I don't think they can unless Robert turns us on.
Good evening. Could I just test if you can hear us?
Oh, Dave can.
I can hear you, Pam.
Yeah.
Hear us.
Yes. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
6 o'clock, we all good? Right, evening one and all. Welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting, 17th of October 2023. My name is Chris. I am Councillor for Beerchurch and chair this meeting. Just to remind everyone that in of an emergency, somebody's dinging. In the event of an emergency, there are no practices that are arranged for this evening, but if the alarm sounds, then we need to evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase, whichever's closest, and congregating in the car park in St Rumble Street. This meeting is being held in the Grand Jury Room. It's being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel, and that recording will be available after the meeting to view. So participants are requested to use microphones when speaking at all times, please. Members of the committee or members of the public, if in attendance, can use electronic devices to access meeting papers, use mobile phones and any other devices, including cameras, but please use these discreetly. Don't use flash functions and keep them on silent. The mayor's the mayor's charitable coffers would benefit greatly if anybody's phone goes off during the meeting. There are toilets on every floor in the building, an induction loop in this room should anybody require it. So if you have any issues with hearing, please ensure that you alert us and we'll make sure that you can hear everything. And I'm just going to ask people to introduce themselves, and then I'll tell you a bit about how the agenda is going to be slightly rejigged this evening. One other thing I need to just say, I'm anticipating that this evening's meeting may go on a bit longer than our usual meeting, so we will have a break at 8 p.m. if we get to that stage. So, going to my left.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Smith, representing St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Good evening, Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer and Head of Governance.
Good evening, I'm Richard Carr and I'm the Interim Managing Director of Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited.
Good evening, I'm Alistair Wilson, I'm the Senior Commercial Manager for Colchester Commercial Holdings.
Good evening, Councillor William Sunnox. I'm from Rural North Ward and I'm the Shadow Portfolio Holder for Resources.
Good evening, Councillor Rhys Smithson, Tiptree Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Sarah Naylor, Lexton and Braithwaite Ward.
Good evening, Chair, and all the listeners at home. Councillor Dave Harris from Beerchurch Ward.
Councillor Alison J, Highwoods Ward.
Chris Hartgrove, Shared Service Director of Finance and Deputy Section 151 Officer.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. And joining us virtually online, we have the Chief Exec. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair. Pam Donnelly, Chief Executive, and Lindsay Barker, Deputy Chief Exec. Thank you.
And moving along, I've got Councillor Mark Corey.
Good evening, Chair and panel, and those listening. Councillor Mark Corey, Portfolio Holder for Resources and Ward Member for Wivenhoe.
And Councillor Martin Warnes.
Good evening, committee. I'm Martin Warnes, Chair of CCHL Holding Company and Ward Member for Beerchurch Ward.
And last but not least, we have one of our officers, Catherine.
So, I hope you can hear me. I'm Catherine Jobling, the Interim Technical Manager working with Chris Hartgrove, and I'm here really I prepared the statement of accounts, so I'm here to help Chris answer any questions.
Thank you and welcome one and all. The pleasing thing I have to say is there are no substitutions this evening, which I think is probably the first time this municipal year that we haven't had one. So it's good to see you all here. So in terms of the agenda then, what I am going to do is move item 9 and item 10 to the early part of the meeting. So they will now become 7 and 8. So as soon as we've dealt with the standard stuff on the agenda, we'll move straight to item 9. So there are no urgent items that I'm aware of. No, and Matt is confirming that. Does anyone have any declarations of interest for this evening? I'm not seeing any indications, so we'll move swiftly on. Item 5 is minutes of the previous meeting. Anything from those minutes? There are no minutes, you're right. So no minutes to be considered for approval this evening. Have your say. There's no one present indicating an interest in having your say. I just want to state for the record that we did have a request by a member of the public to submit a written have your say this evening, and I spoke with our officer. We looked at the Constitution. When we had the arrangements that pertained whilst we had COVID, that was allowable, but those regulations ceased to exist some time ago, and therefore I wasn't prepared to allow a member of the public to submit a written request for information this evening. I was concerned that that might create a precedent that would spread across the council's activities, so I said no. So there are no have your say requests this evening. That moves us then on to item 7 or item 9 on your agenda papers, and that is the Amphora Future Strategy. And I'm going to ask Richard Carr to introduce that for us, and also to bring in Councillor Warnes once you've concluded your introduction, please, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So perhaps I could start by just making clear that although we're proposing some quite significant changes to the arrangements affecting Amphora, and I will use the term Amphora to refer to the group of companies summarised in the paper. So we are proposing some significant changes. I think that needs to be understood in the context of a great deal that has been achieved through the arrangements to date. But essentially what the proposals are based on is a recognition that the circumstances in which the council and therefore its trading companies have changed. And in particular, the kind of council's ability to accommodate risk by virtue of the increased financial pressures that all local authorities are finding themselves under has a significant bearing, and it is appropriate therefore to kind of review the strategy for Amphora, taking into account the circumstances that the council as its sponsoring authority is now facing. And I've described that changed context, particularly in section 3 of the report. So I won't spend too much time elaborating on that. We've also tried to take into account the likely move towards a corporate landlord model by the City Council, and that does have a bearing on a particular aspect of Amphora, which is currently involved in delivering back to the council an estates management service. But what we've tried to do is, taking into account those changed circumstances, and in particular the change in the City Council's ability to withstand risk, is to step back and think about...
Richard, apologies. Councillor Smithson.
Sorry, Chair. I'm slightly confused because the papers that we're about to discuss been published under Part B?
No,
No.
I think if I may, Chair, the majority of the papers are in Part A.
Are in Part A. There's only some, and I was going to say when Richard and Martin have concluded, I was going to say that there are confidential items that are in Part B that we cannot discuss in this part of the meeting.
But, sorry, Chair, but there's only one item on the agenda which relates to all of the papers that are being presented. So unless we're going to, I'm just not sure how practically we can talk about the recommendation that comes in the paper without referring to the stuff that's in Part B. Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm going to take advice from the monitoring officer at this stage.
Thank you, Chair. I think the best thing is to allow Richard to do his public introduction of the papers, and then we can resolve to go into private session, and then you can have the conversation around the appendices in Part B, if that's okay.
Sorry, we'll have to go into private and then come back into public.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that, you're happy with that? Yeah. No, that's fine. As I say, thanks for raising it. I was going to just clarify for everyone once Richard and Martin had concluded their introduction, but I think we're now all clear. Thank you. Carry on, Richard.
Thank you. So against that change in the risk profile for the City Council, it's appropriate that Amphora takes a step back and thinks about what might be an appropriate strategy for it going forward. And we've tried to do that in the context of the Council's strategic objectives. And we begin with a bit of analysis of the position with the Northern Gateway project. And essentially, you'll see that what we're suggesting is that the City Council needs to be right at the heart of decision making as far as that project is concerned, and that whereas there has been a tendency for the individual components of that, which are being supported by Amphora, to at times perhaps be looked at in isolation of each other, it's important that these are treated as a programme and managed as such. And so there is technical expertise available within Amphora to support the City Council, but the City Council should be, if you like, in the driving seat in terms of what happens with that really important development. And you'll see that we are saying that against that background of changed circumstances, you might conclude it's appropriate to kind of take a stock take and to think about what are the best future delivery options for the Northern Gateway project. There is a particular impact of the delays that have been experienced with the Northern Gateway project on one of the Amphora companies, which is specifically the energy company, which in essence is in a position where having created some assets, it cannot complete the project and it cannot recover income until there are developments that take place on site, people living in homes to consume the energy that would be delivered. And in that context, the timescales over delivery are completely out of the control of the energy company. So it's not as a result of anything the energy company has done or has not done, but the timing is influenced by factors beyond the energy company's control. So the specific proposition affecting the energy company is that it should be hibernated. Similarly, we've taken a good hard look at the increasing pressures on the City Council around housing. You have more people that are turning to you for assistance because of the difficulties that they're experiencing in accessing housing that they can afford. So in that context, there's arguably an even greater premium on delivering your aspirations around housing and indeed wider regeneration. But I think going back to those changed external factors, the changed ability of the City Council to accommodate risk, frankly, I think the position in Colchester, which is mirrored up and down the country, is that I don't think it's sustainable to proceed with the original model as far as Colchester and Flora Homes is concerned, which is for the council to lend money to that company, to then sell land to that company, and then hoped that that company could deliver housing in a way that would meet both the objectives around housing delivery, but also pay a dividend back to the city council from that particular activity. The reality of local authority housing companies up and down the country is that that model has not culminated in significant increases in housing supply. And as I say, the situation that I think you face in Colchester is mirrored up and down the country. So you'll see, again, there is a proposition to hibernate the housing company. But I do think there are some useful skills, some important skills that reside within Amphora, and I think those skills could be redeployed in a way that assists the City Council working with its partners to expedite the delivery of housing in other ways. We comment again on energy generation. I've already alluded to that, so I won't dwell on that anymore. We then come to the council's aspirations around economic performance, and this has a particular bearing on Colchester Fibre. I think it was one of the drivers that led to the focus on the rollout of fibre through the Amphora arrangement. This is an area where what we're suggesting is that we come back to you with a kind of more worked up proposition. It is quite a discrete area. I think there are some really interesting opportunities here. I would want to ensure that you have access to the fullest possible advice on the different options for taking that part of the business forward or otherwise, whether or not there is a case for bringing other investment partners into the equation. And rather than try to load the report with lots of detail on that particular issue, which does need a fair degree of due diligence, we're inviting you to take the view that we should leave that in situ for the moment, but we should come back with some more worked up propositions covering the position as far as fibre is concerned. As I've hinted at already, I think you are likely to move towards a corporate landlord model for your estates function as part of your objective towards delivering ever more modern services reflected in your corporate strategy. And to be frank, there is a way in which you could deliver a corporate landlord model which maintains the arrangement whereby some estates or assets related functions are delivered within Amphora and some, as now, are delivered within Colchester Borough Homes. I have to say, I do think whilst that is a perfectly feasible option, the existing arrangements have created a degree of ambiguity in places, and I do think, on balance, there is value in incorporating all of those functions within the City Council under a new corporate landlord model. So we've reflected that in the shape of the proposals that are contained in the report. Then we come to the issue of supporting the City Council with the delivery of aspects of your capital programme. And when I talk about your capital programme, I am referring here to both those projects that you fund directly as a City Council, as well as where you have secured external funding, be it through government grant, be it through Section 106 agreements. So there are times when Amphora colleagues have been assisting with the delivery of some of those projects. And the model at the moment involves a combination of Amphora being reimbursed for that support through a combination of management fee, but also fees levied in relation to specific projects that we work on. And to be frank, in practice, the team that are supporting the delivery of the capital programme within Amphora work exclusively on council projects. Theoretically, they could support other agencies. In reality, because of capacity issues, they work exclusively for the City Council. And therefore, we need to maximise the scope for the City Council to make use of their services. And I think the rather complicated charging regime that exists at the moment has actually acted as a disincentive at times to colleagues in the City Council drawing on the technical support that they might need to, because they're worried about picking up fees. And actually, I think we need to reverse the incentive. I think we need to maximise the incentive for City Council colleagues to make full use of that technical expertise. At the same time, there is a potential option to kind of look at the requirements of other local authorities who similarly are at times struggling to access the technical expertise that they need to deliver their capital programmes, and to look at some sort of shared service model. That requires quite a bit of thought. It requires quite a bit of delicate negotiation with potential other partners. But it is an option that I think merits a bit more exploration. But in the meantime, what we're suggesting is, well, let's not disrupt the team in terms of where it sits at the moment. Let's leave it in situ within Amphora, but let's move away from this rather complicated charging arrangement, which, as I say, I think actually acts as a disincentive at times to the City Council drawing on the expertise that it needs to. And we'll do a little bit more work on that option of a shared service model and come back with some proposals on a future occasion. All of that enables you to contemplate a situation whereby Amphora becomes a much more simplified operation and focuses on those activities and services where it is genuinely trading. It is providing services and recouping an income from parties other than the City Council. And that's particularly around events, that's around the helpline activity and around the CCTV activity. I'd say we'll back on the fibre issue on a future occasion. So I do think there is scope to move towards a much more simplified set of arrangements, and that lies at the heart of the proposals. So in summary, a hibernation of the energy company, hibernation of Amphora Homes, leaving for the moment the team that supports the delivery of capital projects in situ, but having a look at the option around the shared service arrangement, modifying the fee arrangements in the meantime, working on the basis that the estates function within Amphora will transfer into the council as part of the council's anticipated move towards a corporate landlord model, and then, as I say, a much more simplified set of arrangements as far as those activities that are, if you like, genuinely able to trade and to deliver a kind of dividend back to the City Council. I would just like to add, though, that I think it would be wrong to view the extent of even those areas that are trading, the extent of their contribution to the council as being any dividend return. Because, for example, if you think about the events activities, they do bring significant numbers of people into the city. And so there's a wider economic benefit, I think, from those activities, which, whilst we've not put a kind of quantification on, I think it would be unwise to overlook that altogether. So if you accept the thrust of those proposals, we will come forward to your subsequent meeting with a more detailed budget set of proposals for next year in particular. We will come back on a future occasion with some more worked up proposals as far as Colchester Fibre is concerned, and we will come back with a more worked up proposal covering the hibernation of Amphora Homes. We've got on later on the agenda the type of more detailed proposal covering Kale, the energy company. So I will conclude at that point, other than to emphasise the point I made right at the start, that you should not construe these proposals as being a reflection of what has been delivered up until now. But changed circumstances require a new strategy, and that lies at the heart of these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard, for summarising what is quite a detailed paper that we've had before us this evening. I'm just going to invite Councillor Warnes as Chair of CCHL to add anything that he feels he might want to your introduction. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can all hear me. There isn't much more to add. I think Richard has adequately and eloquently covered what is before members at the meeting tonight. Obviously, I want to thank Richard and his team for all of the work they've done to bring forward the proposals that you are asked to confirm this evening, and I agree that they are driven by the external changes, and the holding company board supported the proposal put forward by the energy company board, which is for hibernation, and we supported the need to for Amphora to basically step back and refocus the company's activities towards its trading arm, and obviously, like Richard, I hope members will accept the proposals before them, so we can go away and work up much greater detail for the proposals to be able to bring back to you at a later date. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Warnes. Right, so we've had the introduction. We're aware that there are items of confidentiality that are linked to what we're discussing in this item on the agenda. So I haven't got the exact wording in front of me, Matt, but I'm just going to roughly suggest to everyone that in accordance with section 100A, subsection 4, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we go into private session, I'm conscious that there'll be potentially people, members of the public listening, who will be unfamiliar with some of the terms that are being used. I think it might be useful just to clarify what is meant by hibernation. Thank you.
That's fine, Councillor Naylor, and I think we can probably pick that up when we come back into public session with that item on the agenda. That's all right. So I think we'll bear that in mind and ensure that we do. We are quite open about what we're discussing this evening, so that members of the public and also our own staff who are employed in these organisations understand what we're actually talking about this evening. So, Councillor Sunnox.
Would you like to make it clear that the private session will be as short as it possibly can and that we go for transparency?
I was just about to do exactly that, William. So before I move, then I will just remind everyone my view, and I think it's the view of all members around the table, is that as much as possible, anything and everything that we do as a council should be in the public domain. However, there are occasionally things that are of such a confidential nature that they need to be dealt with in private session. And we are aware that before us this evening there is some information that cannot be dealt with in the public domain. So I'm going to move that in accordance with section 100A, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, at this stage, for as limited a time as possible, we exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting, so that those items containing exempt information in Part B of this agenda can be decided. And we will return to public session as soon as possible. All agreed? Thank you. So that's unanimous. So we'll go into private session and we'll alert the public as soon as we are back in public session.